The government has taken a firm decision to release Mr. Mandela unconditionally. I am serious about bringing this matter to finality without delay. The government will take a decision soon on the date of his release.
Days after this announcement, F.W. de Klerk, who replaced P.W. Botha as head of state 6 months earlier, keeps his promise. Veteran freedom fighter Nelson Mandela walks out a free man after 27 years behind bars. The winds of change are blowing across the nation. With the exception of right-wing organizations like the Conservative Party, there's general consensus that apartheid has to come to an end. 19 groups, including de Klerk's National Party and Mandela's ANC, participate in the Convention for a Democratic South Africa, or CODESA. It's a platform of negotiations at the World Trade Center in Kempton Park. But there's a conspicuous absentee, Mangosuthu Buthelezi.
Part of the reason why Buthelezi withdrew from the negotiations was over two primary issues. The first was over the involvement of the Zulu King, which he thought the Zulu King needed to be represented in the negotiations as the Zulu King. The second issue that he was concerned about, he thought that the ANC and the Nationalist Party government, especially under de Klerk, were negotiating and reaching agreements at the exclusion of other political parties, especially the eNCA Freedom Party at the time.
For example, at one stage, the African National Congress leaders and leaders of the National Party went into what they call a bus parade in the bush, where they agreed that any agreement between them was sufficient consensus. In other words, it didn't matter what other people think, what other parties think, as long as they agreed, there was consensus.
But despite Buthelezi's absence, negotiating parties make progress. They pledged to investigate a few issues, including the establishment of the new constitution and setting up a new interim government. But this doesn't change anything on the ground. The political violence that started in the previous decade intensifies.
Elements within the National Party, going very high up to the highest leadership of the National Party to cabinet level, were resisting this. And there was a deliberate effort to weaken the other side, to weaken the liberation forces, whether it's around the ANC, AZAPO, PAC, and so on. But there was a deliberate effort that in the negotiations, the hand of the liberation movement must be weakened. And in order to do that, let us destabilize them on the ground, let's destabilize communities that are supporting them.
But perhaps this conflict is also captured as a proxy conflict for the Nationalist Party. And whether the IFP consciously or not did the bidding of the Nationalist Party, but there appears to be significant evidence to suggest that indeed, at some point, the IFP may have been a proxy fighter for the Nationalist Party against the ANC and the United Democratic Front.
Yes, I did take part in the violence. Remember, we were caught in between. We had to defend ourselves. We had a formation called SDU Self-Defense Unit on one hand. Then there was another formation called SPU Self-Protection Unit. So we became part of the SPU to try and defend our people whenever they were attacked.
The IFP had some attacks. They used to attack the neighboring townships. And there was a time when the communities were very much fed up with that, and they had to clean them out of their townships. And they migrated to Omadela Hostel. So being young and being comrades, and we knew that they created mess in other areas, we never wanted them in the townships.
The conflict was started by the youth of the ANC called comrades. Whenever there was a strike, a protest, when people they were forcing people not to go to work, forcing them to drink things like fish oil and other things, and people became very irritated, and they did not want to be part of that. That's how eventually people said, no, enough is enough. Let's also protect ourselves.
They surrounded my house. They shot at my house. Basically, a day before, there was a guy who was my neighbor, was a member of IFP, who was shooting people around them. So this guy tried to attack me. I was shot at in front of the house with other comrades. So they missed. They couldn't find us, then went into the house. So unfortunately, we never knew that the following day they would come encircling the house and attacking us. We had to go out and retaliate.
Every morning when you're going around the areas of Katoras meaning Katlehong, Togoza, and Vosloorus, there were bodies lying all over the show, and whenever you go to work, there will be bodies. The next morning, people been burnt.
A number of houses were attacked from the comrades and from IFPs. A number of comrades died.
April, May, I can't say the exact date. Bekukhona ikhansela ngazi bekuyike waseMidlands. Lo khansela leyo yabulawa. Manje kufanele azongcwatshwa. Mabaza bazongcwaba lo baba lo. Baye bahamba baya eValo. Kwandlula more than 40 buses egcwele ngabantu. Labantu baphethe ama-weapon, baphethe imikhonto, baphethe whatever ingadiliza umuntu, ingalimaza nje umuntu. Mababuya sizwe nje sekuphuma ibhamu, abantu begenqwa bashawa ngamaphanga basusa umuntu ikhanda ngephanga. And after lento lesiyenzekile, some 3, 4, 5 minutes kwaqhamuka amaphoyisa. They never did anything.
Besides with the night weekend bayaya eValo bebagcoka amaduka abovu babonane ukuthi kuthula yabo nabaye eValo. Besihlala sinaleyo trauma every weekend, sihlala nathi siyazi ukuthi kumele siphathe something or la thina sijwayelanga nokuphathana nalezo jazi ukuthi nangababona nje ngihlala ngiredi ukuthi ngibaleke. Into enkulu why bekutargetwa thina la eShawela yabona most of those people bebaphuma la baphuma khona from those places hostel la bebahlanganela khona maybe bayongcwaba ngithi but bazondlula zonke le ndawo mara khona la bebamosha khona mara the most target yithi la eShawela. That surprised me. Why thina, why ku targetwe thina kakhulu ngoba sifelani ukuthi singamashangana.
This thing was not orchestrated. Once they killed on the other side would revenge. Counter, and went on to preempt attacks. This is what happened. That thing got its own momentum.
As CODESA is still in session and political parties are discussing the way forward, the process suffers a massive setback. Chris Hani, an ANC and SA Communist Party leader who's extremely popular with the militant urban youth, is assassinated. Conservative Party MP Clive W. Lewis and Janusz Walusz, a member of the neo-Nazi group Afrikaner Weerstandsbeweging, are arrested for the high-profile murder. Hani's killing pushes South Africa to the brink of a civil war. But it also adds impetus to the CODESA discussions. An election date is secured, the 27th of April, 1994.
And the IFP said, we are not going to participate in a new dispensation that does not give a proper recognition to the kingdom of the Zulu nation, which is composed of the traditional institution within the Zulu nation.
And so, a month before South Africans go to the polls, Inkatha supporters march to Shell House, the then ANC headquarters in downtown Johannesburg. They are not happy with the terms of the planned democratic elections. As they try to enter the building, the ANC's security opens fire, reportedly at the instruction of its president, Nelson Mandela. A total of 19 people lose their lives in what would be known as the Shell House massacre. Meanwhile, back in KwaZulu, Buthelezi is frantically planning to secure the ownership of the land of his Bantustan.
The last legislation that I piloted in the KwaZulu Legislative Assembly was the Ngonyama Trust Act in Ngonyama land Trust Act, because my advisors advised me that if I didn't do this, all the bits and pieces that are regarded as the kingdom of the king would actually become state land.
But he knows he can't do it without the involvement of two key politicians.
We went to Skukuza with Mr. Mandela, with Mr. Clark, where I was trying to implore them to agree to have international mediators coming to South Africa to sort out the position of the institution of the monarchy within a democratic dispensation like ours.
But these discussions aren't moving fast enough. The clock is ticking. Preparations for the national elections are ongoing without eNCA.
So on the 19th of April, just a few days before our first democratic election, we had a meeting in Pretoria with the president, Mr. de Klerk, with Mr. Mandela, the president of the ANC, and myself. There we signed a solemn agreement that international mediation again will be restored as soon as possible, but after the election.
Finally, a crucial breakthrough.
The Ingonyama Trust Act is assented to just a few days before the 27 April 1994. It is significant because the Ingonyama Trust Act, what it tries to do is to preserve all of the land that Buthelezi would have been leader over in KwaZulu under the custodianship of the Ingonyama, Isilo King Goodwill Zwelithini. And that is why the initial act says there's just only one trustee, and it's the king. There wasn't even a board at the time. It follows later.
This assurance is enough to convince Buthelezi to take part in the election. Now a party with ambition to govern in a democratic country, eNCA changes its name to eNCA Freedom Party. And on the 27th of April 1994, South Africans come out in their millions to vote in the very first democratic elections. Nelson Mandela's ANC secures nearly 63%, making him the nation's first black president. Buthelezi's IFP secures 10.5% of the vote and, as expected, also wins KwaZulu-Natal. Constituting his first cabinet in the government of national unity, Mandela appoints Buthelezi as Home Affairs Minister.
The interim constitution makes a provision that all political parties that get X number of seats have legitimate right to be represented in the government of national unity, which is why that government is made up of the ANC, the NP, the IFP, not because of Mandela's altruism or his sense of reconciliation. He was tied by the dictates of the 1993 interim constitution.
Members of the senior management of Home Affairs, regional directors present.
The IFP is now in government, and Buthelezi is rebranding from a Bantustan leader to a Democrat and a principled politician.
And that we will thereby contribute.
But the perception of the IFP as apartheid collaborators lingers. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or TRC, which was set up in the mid-1990s, uncovers just how deep the party's involvement was in political violence.
Buthelezi had been part of the planning about the creation of this third force. And all of that is no great revelation because it's there, it's in the TRC reports, and it is well documented in actual documentations of the State Security Council.
those claims in themselves are very irresponsible and reckless. But also at the same time, the credibility of the TRC is very much in question on a whole host of issues, on its objectivity, on its politicization, and whether it has actually delivered reconciliation, notwithstanding the truth.
It's been more than a decade since apartheid collapsed. South Africa's democracy is gradually maturing. Nelson Mandela has retired. His successor, Thabo Mbeki, is himself closer to ending his second term in office. At the same time, Mangosuthu Buthelezi and his IFP are now occupying opposition benches. With every election, the party loses support. This decline is accelerated by two major players in KwaZulu-Natal's politics. First, Jacob Zuma, who campaigns under the 100% Zulu Boy banner.
He cajoles around Amakhosi in KwaZulu-Natal, presents himself as this actually traditional leader of KwaNxamalala, and not just as a statesman, as a liberation fighter. And that becomes important. No wonder then the support of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal almost shoots up in dramatic ways in 2009 national and provincial elections.
And then enter Zanele Kamagwaza Msibi. In January 2011, the former IFP chairperson launches the National Freedom Party. Some prominent members of the organization she once served defect openly. The NFP is ready to contest Buthelezi's slipping stronghold in KwaZulu-Natal, and it seems ready to take on the ANC.
The formation of the National Freedom Party represents the rising of the sun that pushes away the night of despair. That our party will be about people, people, and people in capital letters.
In 2011, the NFP debuts with 10% of the local government vote in KwaZulu-Natal. Buthelezi may still have the position of traditional prime minister of the Zulu kingdom, but his grip on regional politics is shaky. His IFP risks slipping into irrelevance. After 44 years at the helm, the founder and president of eNCA Freedom Party is stepping down. Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who's already in his 90s, is finally handing over the baton to his chosen successor, Velenkosini Hlabisa. But he won't step out of the limelight just yet.
I retired as the leader of the IFP, but then they passed a resolution saying that, well, as long as I'm still breathing, I must assist what they call the leadership transition.
But the months leading up to the IFP conference where Buthelezi stepped down were trying and tiresome for the Buthelezi family. His wife, Princess Irene, died after a long illness.
They had been together for 60 years. So, that's a very long time knowing somebody. So it was very difficult because we kept saying we didn't see the way clear how he was going to make it, because he had always been such a strong support to him for as long as we could remember. Of course, we were born, found him together.
Born into royalty, groomed to become an ANC leader who went on to establish his own political party, a husband and a father, a hero to some, a villain to others.
History will remember Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi as a complex, controversial, once violent, and somewhat remade leader in the democratic dispensation of South Africa.
He is my mentor. He is my role model. He is someone who made me to understand politics better. He has been exemplary throughout his political career.
Prince Buthelezi's legacy is very rich, and I'm sure that when it is written, as it is being written, it will tell a story simply of a man who loved his country.
There are so many widows and orphans out there who are victims of that man. And unfortunately, because we moved on in this country, we chose the path of peace, we chose the path of reconciliation. Many of those crimes will never be punished, which is okay. That's the path we chose.